Well, I spent a memorable Friday afternoon with some dear friends touring the National Gallery of Denmark. It's not far from the King's Garden in central Copenhagen. And the guide excitedly told us about a new exhibit on surrealism, which she said has become popular again. And I thought, no wonder. Surrealism emerged in Europe as a response to the First World War. And so you can see why it's popular again, as the post-war consensus of the Second World War has finally crumbled with Russia's invasion and ongoing war with Ukraine. You didn't come to Gospelbound because you thought that I was an expert in surrealism, but I did read the curator's explanations of André Breton and his second Surrealist Manifesto from 1929, fateful year in Western history, the stock market crash. Now, here is one of those summaries. This is the Danish National Museum's summary of surrealism, and you can see then why it's so significant for today. Here's the summary. Inspired by Freud's psychoanalysis, the surrealists see drives as a fundamental energy that moves human beings, not only towards life and creation, but also towards dissolution and chaos. This is evident in their depictions of war, disintegrating bodies, and challenges to authority figures. These artists allow themselves to be guided by their drives, which can lead to both the construction of new visions and the dismantling of existing norms. Now, you can see and even feel in the surrealists, in their work, in their paintings, the destruction that was suffered by a generation whose world was destroyed by war. You can also see, like those German cities that are facades, that they didn't intend to put the world back together the same way that they inherited it. They couldn't. It was broken. There was no going back to July 1914. And so, guided by Freud, they would be driven to reconstruct life however they please. Yes, you can definitely see why surrealism is popular again. We're not going back to the world before the COVID global pandemic, or Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or the terrorist attacks on Israel by Gaza, or out of Gaza, or Germany before the bombs. Ryrie says we can't go back to Christianity either. It's not an option, so we'll have to make a new world again, however we feel. We'll be lucky. If this is true, we're going to be lucky if it lasts as long as the post-war consensus did. No one knows. We're navigating the future without a compass, only our drives. That's what the surrealists are telling us. This is modern Western secularism. We've internalized Christianity, but we won't acknowledge it. We've left the church. We've publicized Christianity, but we won't credit it. We've abandoned Christianity, but we don't know how to replace it. Let's say that again. The essential nature of modern Western secularism is that we've internalized, as good Protestants, Christianity, but won't acknowledge where it came from. We've publicized Christianity. We've applied it to all of life, but we won't credit it. We need to be able to export it as a universal good, even to non-Christians. And now then, in full-flowered secularism, with the decline of the church, we've abandoned Christianity, but we don't have anything but our drives to know what's supposed to replace it. And when you consider this, history, you see, is neither cyclical nor is it linear. We don't know where we're going, and we're not just repeating the past. One thing we know as Christians, reading our scriptures, God often surprises us. The post-war consensus of secular universals, even just a few years ago, well, let's start further back. At one point, that kind of secular universal peace, that seemed impossible. Nothing like that had ever happened in world history. Then, for decades and decades, it seemed impregnable. And now, you're seeing with the revival of the surrealists, it's unlivable. Fascinating. At one point, it seemed impossible Then it was impregnable. Now it's unlivable. This is what I heard again and again from church leaders in this context. It's not unlivable. Modern secularism is not unlivable because Copenhagen is a miserable place to visit or to live. No. Thanks to Christianity and Protestantism, it is a marvelous place. It is a remarkable achievement. What makes it unlivable is that in the end, reality always wins. Once you've drunk your coffee, you've eaten your pastry, you got to walk home and you got to do the laundry. The social welfare system is great, and in the end, it's always going to fail you because it can't stop death. Romans 8 is true, whether or not it ever feels that way on a sunny September morning. Today, secularism is running into reality, and despite these appearances, it's losing. Reality remains inconvenient to those who deny God. It's inconvenient to run into the reality that two genders are different. It's inconvenient to run into the reality that not every metaphysic produces the same desired results. It's inconvenient to run into the reality that neighbors often desire to defeat or conquer their other neighbors. It's inconvenient to run into the reality that we need some basis to tolerate differences while also maintaining social cohesion. It's inconvenient to run into the reality that we need a shared basis for justice while also preserving freedoms of conscience, of speech, and assembly. It's inconvenient to run into the reality that we need help restraining the drives that destroy ourselves and others. There has to be a purpose for progress beyond the cycles of fashion, of art that comes in and out of popularity, and merely our feelings of superiority over the supposedly unenlightened past. Now, I do see a future for the church in the most secular cities of the West. I heard about it from the leaders of TGC Norden. But I pray for them, and I would ask you to pray for them as well. Their work often feels like pushing a boulder uphill while they're slipping in mud. They are trying to prove the need for the solution that they're offering in the gospel, when most people are simply content to gaze into the blue skies with their coffee and their pastries. They're not wanting to think about death. They're not wanting to gaze into their souls. They're not wanting to question whether the numbing effects of their drives will ever get old or stale, and thank God, ourselves, humanity, who's supposed to thank here, for the welfare state. Something does seem to be changing, however, and I want to share 3 perspectives on what these leaders think will happen. I think we see 3 options. Any one of them could emerge as a tension point. Remember what Hurtado said about growing and successful religious movements. Any one of these 3 options could emerge as a tension point that would demand a widespread, unified social action. And when that happens, it's not surrealism. It's going to provide the answers. The West is going to need Christianity again. Remember, religions thrive under at least moderate threats. They create that need that's always there, but they make that need known and widespread. 3 options that I see and I've heard of from leaders in these secular countries. The first threat to secularism and an opportunity then for Christianity is the rise of Islam. And that is especially through immigration since 2015. 2015 is certainly that date where a lot of these concerns had peaked. Islam and secular humanism make strange bedfellows, despite their shared opposition to Christendom. Even Sweden today is not happy after its failure to integrate large numbers of Muslim immigrants. One of the major problems with the post-war consensus and the way that Christianity was translated into this universal respect for human dignity is that when you forget where these ideas came from, you forget what makes your society different. And much of Europe is finding out that many Muslims don't share their drives, don't share their vision for the public good. And so the rise of Islam could make the secular West go looking for support and turn back to Christianity for survival. Hopefully, again, not merely as some sort of political tool, but as the source of genuine spiritual awakening. The second threat to secularism and opportunity for Christianity is related. The secular West is not the only place that is currently suffering a collapse in fertility, but the awareness of that collapse started in the Nordics, in these countries. It's not just a problem that the social welfare system depends on younger workers and younger taxpayers. It's that a society that won't get married and have children is a society that has lost a sense of purpose, of sacrifice, and even of hope. And given the higher fertility rates right now in many Islamic countries, Europe may face a simple math problem within 1 or 2 generations. The question is, could Christianity restore hope? Could Christianity offer a vision for giving life to a new generation that would steward the culture and values of these beautiful countries? That's the second threat to secularism and opportunity, perhaps, for Christianity. The third threat, secularism, opportunity for Christianity, is even more pressing, and it can change in an instant. There were not many out there who thought Sweden and Finland would join NATO until all of a sudden they moved quickly to join NATO after Russia invaded Ukraine. The end of this post-war consensus has created and centered, ultimately, concerns about basic security and survival, once again, as was the case for so many years in these countries. In fact, drones had swarmed and shut down the Copenhagen airport just hours as I left. An authoritarian axis between Russia, China, and North Korea could put much of the democratic, secular West in imminent danger. In light of that threat, could Christianity remind these countries why it's worth defending themselves and their weaker brothers? Could their historic faith bring unity to resolve and to meet this challenge, whatever the cost, whatever the burden they need to bear? So I think about these 3 threats to secularism and opportunities for Christianity, especially focused on secular Europe. I think once again about basic reality. Christianity is the way and the truth and the life. It is the ultimate reality, whether or not anyone acknowledges the lordship of Christ. But in the secular West, our biggest hindrance is the lack of a perceived or felt need by our neighbors, the lack of an imminent threat that wakes them up from a secular slumber. It's the experience of preaching Romans 8 and everyone else is out there enjoying a football match. Secularism in Europe, it's like an animal in a habitat with no known predators. Protestantism has given them these peaceful and prosperous cities. There's no sense of what's lost if the churches are empty, because after all, the buses still run on time, the food still shows up on the table, the welfare state still provides. But that need could become more widely felt under any or all of these three threats? And if so, how will we respond as Christians? As proud Protestants, I hope, will respond by believing that the gospel brings transformation to individuals and societies. It's done it before. We believe that it can do it. It can do it again. Like the Reformers, we're not going to be content to settle for outward conformity. And I hope we will also respond by not trying to resolve that tension between the church and culture and political authorities. Do not fall for the establishment shortcut. It's another dead end. Jesus told us to expect tribulation, and he promised to carry us through any trials. He will not fail us in the secular West either.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Gospelbound. For more interviews and to sign up for my newsletter, head over to tgc.org/gospelbound. Rate and review Gospelbound on your favorite podcast platform so others can join the conversation. Until next time, remember, when we're bound to the gospel, we abound in hope.